Forward. What on earth do we mean when we talk about cultivating mindfulness? There's no question that mindfulness is one of the hardest things in the world for us humans to tap into consistently, even though it's not a thing, and even though we can taste it and recognize that experience of tasting in an instant, in any instant. The invitation is always the same, to stop for a moment, just one moment, and drop into wakefulness. That's all. Stop and drop, meaning drop into your experience of experiencing, and for even the briefest of moments, simply holding it in awareness as it is, in no time, or to put it differently, in this timeless moment we call now, the only moment we actually ever have. Luckily, if we miss this moment because we're distracted by one thing or another, caught up in thinking or in our emotions, or with the busyness of what always seems to need getting done, there's always the next moment to begin again, to stop and drop into wakefulness in this moment of now. It seems so simple, and it is, but it's not so easy. In fact, looked at one way, a moment of mindfulness with no agenda whatsoever other than to be aware is just about the hardest thing in the world for us human beings to come to. And it is even harder for us to string two moments of mindfulness together. And yet, paradoxically, mindfulness doesn't involve doing anything at all. In fact, it's a non-doing, a radical non-doing. And right inside any moment of non-doing lies peace, insight, creativity, and new possibilities in the face of old habits of mind and old habits of living. Right in that moment or any moment of non-doing, you are already okay, already perfect in the sense of perfectly who and what you are. And therefore, right in that moment, you are already at home in a profound way, far beyond who you think you are and the ideas and opinions that may so shape and sometimes severely limit your view of the larger whole, not to mention your own possibilities for experiencing that wholeness and benefiting from it. And most interestingly of all is the realization that there is no that moment at some other time except in thought. In actuality, there is only this moment for dropping in. None of this means that you won't get things done. In fact, when your doing comes out of being, when it is truly a non-doing, it is a far better doing and far more creative and even effortless than when we're striving to get things done without an ongoing awareness moment by moment. When our doing comes out of being, it becomes an integral and intimate part of a love affair with awareness itself and with our ability to inhabit that space in our own mind and heart, and to share it with others who are also engaged in that way of being as well, potentially all of us. And none of this means, as is described in considerable detail in this series, that what you are experiencing has to always be pleasant, either during formal meditation practice or in the unfolding of your life. It won't be, and it can't be. The only reason that mindfulness is of any value is that it is profoundly and completely up to the challenge of relating wisely to any experience, whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, wanted or unwanted, even horrific or unthinkable. Mindfulness is capable of meeting and embracing suffering head-on, if and when it is suffering that is predominating at a particular moment or time in your life. We don't learn much of anything about non-doing in school, but most of us have experienced moments of radical non-doing as children. In fact, tons of them. Sometimes it comes as wonder. Sometimes it looks like play. Sometimes it emerges as concern for someone else, a moment of kindness. Another way to put it is that mindfulness is all about being, as in human being, and about life unfolding here and now as it is and embraced in awareness. Therefore, it takes virtually no effort because it's already happening. All it requires is learning to reside in your direct experiencing of this moment, whatever it is, without necessarily thinking that it is particularly yours. After all, even you is just a thought construct when you put it under the microscope and examine it. If you do, you may discover that who you think you are is a very small and at least partially inaccurate account of who and what you actually are. In an instant, you can recognize how large the full dimensionality of your own being really is. You are already whole, already complete, as you are. And at the same time, you're part of a much larger whole, however you care to define it. And that larger whole, let's call it the world, sorely needs that fully embodied and more realized version of you. Our wholeness manifests in everyday life as wakefulness, as pure awareness. Our awareness is an innate human capacity, one that we hardly ever pay attention to or appreciate or learn to inhabit. And ironically, it's already yours, conventionally speaking. You were born with it, so you don't need to acquire it merely to familiarize yourself with this dimension of your own being. Your capacity for awareness is more you and more useful than virtually anything else about you, and that includes all your thoughts and opinions, important as it is to have thoughts and opinions, as long as we don't believe them and cling to them as the absolute truth. And since the paradox is that all of us are already who we are in our fullness, this means that in the cultivation of mindfulness, there is literally no place to go, nothing to do, and no special experience that you're missing or are supposed to have. The fact that you are able to experience anything at all is already extremely special. Ironically, however, the truth of that is hardly ever recognized as we quest for that special something that always seems to somehow elude or frustrate our desiring. Perhaps that perfect meditative moment in your own fantasy of what meditation should produce if you were quote-unquote doing it correctly. There is nothing to acquire because you're missing nothing and lack for nothing, despite what your habitual patterns of thinking and wanting might be telling you in any given moment. You are already whole, already complete, already alive in this moment, already beautiful, just as you are. So no improvements are either necessary or possible. This is it. The only thing that we are missing is recognizing the actuality of life unfolding in this moment, in the form of you, in the form of me, in every dimension of that unfolding in the timeless present we call now, and realizing it, allowing it to be apprehended and thus made real in its fullness. There are no words for this, because words are merely, for all their power and beauty when strung together skillfully, elements of thinking about things, and thus once removed from direct apprehension. At this point, we enter the domain of pure poetry, where we attempt to use words to go beyond words, to convey what is not possible to say in a prose sentence. At this point, we're tapping into what one colleague tellingly calls implicational holistic meaning, much more akin to directly feeling something and knowing it in one's bones, in one's heart, way beneath the words and concepts we may apply to the experience later. Perhaps in the end, it is this capacity that makes us human rather than automatons, and it is precisely here that we intersect with the domain of embodied mindfulness practice. The mystery of awareness is that it is truly beyond words. It is intrinsic to our being. We all already have it, and we always have. It's closer than close. Yet paradoxically, I have already used an awful lot of words to direct you towards apprehending something that is already yours and already you, who you truly are just by virtue of being human. I hope that my pointing to it in words resonates with you and in you at a deeply intuitive level, way beyond words and stories. This book and the others in this series are full of words, thousands of them, and yet none of them are anything but pointers, sight lines for you to look along, feel along, sense along as you stop and drop, stop and drop, stop and drop in, moment by moment. Into what? Whatever is most at hand, most relevant, most salient to you in the moment. Into the actuality of now, of things as they are. Simple? Yes. Can you do it? Of course you can. Does it involve doing? Not really. Yes and no. It only looks like it involves doing. What it really involves is falling awake. And that, as we've seen, is a love affair with what is, and with what might be possible in the next moment if you're willing to show up fully in this one without any expectations or attachments to an outcome. If you think of meditation as a doing, you might as well not pursue it, unless, that is, you also recognize that there is method in the apparent madness or nonsensicality of non-doing. In the ancient Chinese Chan or Zen tradition, this is sometimes spoken of as the method of no method. This is where recognizing the unity of the instrumental and the non-instrumental approaches covered in Book 1 come in. Our intrinsic wakefulness can't be hyped. It can't be sold. It can't be corrupted. It can only be pointed to and realized. And the only way to realize it is to get out of your own way for a moment and simply stop and drop in. Stop and drop in. Stop and drop in. One convenient way to do that is by attending to experience via your senses. So we can experiment. Is it possible for us to come to our senses right in this moment? Can we hear only what is here to be heard? Can we see only what is here to be seen? Can we feel only what is here to be felt? Is it possible for us to wake up to the actuality of this moment of now and to what we might call our truest nature, what lies underneath all our thinking, our concepts, our perspectives, world models, religious teachings, philosophies, scholarships, etc.? None of that is essential to the process of falling awake, although paradoxically any and all of it might be beautifully relevant as long as you aren't attached to it. The key is non-identification with anything as I, me, or mine, because we actually have no idea, or only ideas, about who and what those personal pronouns actually refer to. Thus, just asking, who am I, and then stopping and dropping into awareness, into not knowing, underneath thinking, is the beginning and the end of all meditative practices. Stopping and dropping in. When? Whenever you remember. How about now? And now? And now? Nothing needs to change. You don't have to do anything. Only remember. As the world becomes more and more complex, and our days are filled with endless things to do and then cross off our to-do lists, or moments when we are called to not just stand there, but to do something, it's easy for us to become more and more entrained into narratives in our heads about what is going on and who we are in relationship to it all, about where we are going or hope we are or fear we might not be, and in the process lose touch with much of the beauty and wonder of being alive in the first place. We construct identities, agendas, and futures for ourselves in our own minds, and then lose ourselves in those constructs, in our models of reality, and in our thoughts, which, even if they're true, are only true to a degree, definitely not entirely true, and usually not true enough. By that point, we're probably too busy, too caught up in the momentum of all the doing in our lives to remember that we could also be awake. We so easily default to an automatic pilot mode, descending into the familiar ruts in our thinking and our emotional life, getting caught up in going from agenda item to agenda item, and becoming more and more addicted to all the ways we have to distract ourselves through our devices and our so-called infinite connectivity, that we lose sight of what is right in front of us and of what is called for now, and now, and now. The cultivation of mindfulness, both formally and informally, can pop that bubble right in the moment it arises, or as soon as we recognize what's happening. It can uncover and help us recover hidden dimensions of ourselves that we will need going forward more than ever if we are to be true to our own humanity and its full flourishing in the form of you. None of us wants to have, "I should have spent more time working," or "I wish I'd been more distracted" on our gravestone. But many of us act that way in how we allocate our energies and in the sum total of our missed moments. Mindfulness can be a counterbalance to all of that without forcing any of it to stop. It's only we who have to stop, and only for this timeless moment. Since this book is about how to practice mindfulness in everyday life, let's be clear about it. There is nothing other than everyday life. Nothing is excluded from everyday life, including all the thoughts and emotions we might be having in any moment, no matter what is happening. In essence, if something is arising, whatever it is taking place within the domain of our life. And so, it becomes part of the curriculum, you might say, of mindfulness in that moment. And if it is recurring, it becomes part of the curriculum in many, many moments, because sometimes the curriculum doesn't let go of us. In the end, all our moments can be part of the cultivation of mindfulness, not just the times during the day that we carve out for formal meditation practice. Life itself becomes the curriculum. Life itself becomes the meditation practice. Herein lies the very essence of the cultivation of mindfulness and of coming to our senses both literally and metaphorically. If we only have this one life to live, are we going to sleepwalk through it, lost in our thoughts and narratives and our emotions? Or are we going to find ways to wake up to the fullness of this moment and of what it might portend if only we were more in touch with and accepting of it and of ourselves in the face of anything and everything that can arise during a single moment or over the course of a day? This book invites you, and I should also say us, since I am no exception, and we're working together on this exploration and adventure, along with millions of others who choose to orient their lives in this way, to practice falling awake moment by moment throughout the day, and also to practice it more formally at specific times by setting aside stretches of clock time that are dedicated solely to being, with no agenda for doing or accomplishing anything, including even secret agendas for getting better at meditating. The fullness of your experience in any moment is already complete, so there's no improving on it. The challenge is always, can we be here with it, for it, in it, until we realize that whatever is unfolding in a particular moment is the curriculum of that moment. And thus realizing, as the old New Yorker cartoon of two monastics in conversation after a period of formal meditation suggests, nothing happens next. This is it. From one end of this book to the other, we will be cultivating embodied wakefulness. Each chapter is really a different door into the very same room, the room of your own awareness. Each doorway, and each of our senses, of course, has its own unique and quite wonderful features. What unifies the practice, though, is that the room we are entering is the space of our own awareness, no matter which doorway we choose to enter through. We literally or metaphorically take our seat and ground ourselves in the practice without editing or judging whatever is arising in experience from moment to moment. As best we can, we do so without getting caught up in asking ourselves whether we are having a good meditative experience or whether what we are experiencing is what we are supposed to be experiencing. If you are having it and you are aware of it, whatever you are experiencing is perfect for that moment, and perfectly what it is. The real question is, how are you going to be in relationship to whatever is unfolding in any particular moment that always turns out to be this one? In other words, can you hold what you are experiencing in awareness without judging it in any way or creating a narrative that you wind up believing about your experience, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? The willingness to rest in awareness with whatever your experience of the moment may be, wanted, unwanted, or barely noticed, pleasant, unpleasant, or neither, invites a new way of being in relationship to experience altogether, including just how judgmental we are. It carries with it a new possibility of inhabiting a space of freedom far bigger than your likes and dislikes and your favorite perspectives on how the world works or doesn't. And thus, for even the briefest of moments, it invites you to simply be who and what you already are, beyond your own name, your story of me, beyond thought altogether, or we might say, underneath your thinking. What you will find is no secret, but at the same time it is a hidden gold mine. It is your own awareness embracing clear seeing and thus greater wisdom. It is equanimity and thus an unwavering stability of mind and heart, nurtured by deep caring and concern. It's an intrinsic love affair with life beyond our too small narratives of who we are and how the world is. As we saw in Meditation is Not What You Think, apprehending who and what we actually are in our fullness and how and what the world actually is in its fullness is a radical act of love and sanity. And this opens us up to the possibility of acting at least a bit more wisely in this world and thereby experiencing the healing and transformation and liberation that come with those actions moment by moment and day by day. So the suggestion is to throw yourself into the formal and informal practices offered here as if there were no tomorrow, as if your entire life hung in the balance. Because in very real and important ways, your life does hang in the balance. And so does the full potential of your presence and effectiveness in the world, in your family, in whatever you chose to do, and in your very body in the way you carry yourself and your body carries you in the world. This engagement takes a certain discipline and resolve. If you possibly can, it means to every day, whether you feel like it or not, both metaphorically and literally, get your rear end on a meditation cushion or a chair or bed and keep it there for longer than you feel comfortable doing so. It means putting out the welcome mat for the inevitable discomfort, impatience, boredom, mind-wandering, and plague of everything else that will arise. It means inviting them all to become your teachers and to help you shape how you choose to be in relationship with it all, the wanted and the unwanted, the pleasant and the unpleasant, the easy and the difficult. Herein lies not torture, although sometimes it can feel that way, but freedom. The freedom of not being caught in and possibly imprisoned by your own liking and disliking or endless narratives, none of which are true enough. In this mirror, the mind wakes up. It comes to know itself, to befriend itself and all experience. And in the process, you, whoever you are, come into being that knowing. In the process, you will know far better both how to be and when doing is called for, what to do. Have fun and stay in touch, especially with yourself. And know that you are not alone in cultivating wakefulness in all these various ways. We are all in it together, stretching the envelope, giving ourselves over to the practice formally and informally as best we can, and seeing, apprehending what emerges and what is so for now. Part 1. The Sensory World. Your one wild and precious life. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last, and too soon? Tell me, What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Mary Oliver, The Summer Day. The mystery of the senses and the spell of the sensuous. Every object, well contemplated, opens a new organ of perception in us. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, 18th century German polymath. What is capable of seeing, hearing, moving, acting has to be your original mind. Chinul, 12th century Korean Zen master. Our senses and what they give rise to are, when well contemplated, mind-boggling in every respect. We tend to take them sorely for granted and underappreciate their scope and depth, if we appreciate them at all. Our senses undergird our capacity to recruit and develop an astonishing array of intelligences for decoding experience and situating ourselves in the phenomenological world. Being in touch with our senses, considerably more than 5 as modern neuroscience is showing, and the worlds they open us to, inwardly and outwardly, is the essence of mindfulness and meditative awareness. Attending to them provides myriad opportunities for realizing wakefulness, wisdom, and interconnectedness in our everyday lives. Under special circumstances, our senses can become extraordinarily refined. It is said that Aboriginal hunters in Australia living in the outback could see the larger moons of Jupiter with the naked eye, so keen was their hunting vision. When one sense is lost at birth or before the age of 2, it seems the other senses may take on qualities of acuity far beyond what we usually think possible. This has been shown in various studies, even with sighted people deprived of sight for relatively short periods of time, from days to hours. They show, in Oliver Sacks's words, a striking enhancement of tactile spatial sensitivity. By simply being in a room with people, Helen Keller could decipher, using her sense of smell, the work they are engaged in. The odors of the wood, iron, paint, and drugs cling to the garments of those who work in them. When a person passes quickly from one place to another, I get a scent impression of where he has been, the kitchen, the garden, or the sick room. The various isolated senses, we tend to think of them as separate and non-intersecting functions, all subtend different aspects of the world for us and facilitate the construction and knowing of the world from raw sensory impressions and our relationship to them. Each sense has its own unique constellation of properties, out of which we build not only our picture of the world out there, but out of which we build meaning and our moment-to-moment capacity to situate ourselves within it. We can learn a great deal about ourselves and what we take entirely for granted from the reported experiences of those who do not have one or more of the sense capacities most of us share, whether it was that way from birth or as a result of later loss. And we can ponder what the experience of such profound loss, at least it feels that way to us, would be, and gain insight from those who have found ways to live fully with such constraints. Thus we might come to more appreciate the gifts of those senses available to us in this moment, and of our virtually limitless potential to put them to use in the service of our own hopefully always growing awareness of the inner and outer landscapes of our lives. For what we know only through the full spectrum of the senses, coupled with that capacity of mind we might call knowing itself, its own kind of sensory and integrative function. Helen Keller writes, "I am just as deaf as I am blind. The problems of deafness are deeper and more complex than those of blindness. Deafness is a much worse misfortune, for it means the loss of the most vital stimulus, the sound of the voice that brings language, sets thoughts astir, and keeps us in the intellectual company of man. If I could live again, I should do much more than I have for the deaf. I have found deafness to be a much greater handicap than blindness." The poet David Wright describes the experience of his deafness as seldom being devoid of a sense of sound. Suppose it is a calm day, absolutely still, not a twig or a leaf stirring. To me it will seem quiet as a tomb, though hedgerows are full of noisy but invisible birds. Then comes a breath of air, enough to unsettle a leaf. I will see it and hear that movement like an exclamation. The illusory soundlessness has been interrupted. I see, as if I heard, a visionary noise of wind in a disturbance of foliage. I have sometimes to make a deliberate effort to remember that I am not hearing anything, because there is nothing to hear. Such non-sounds include the flight and movement of birds, even fish swimming in clear water or the tank of an aquarium. I take it that the flight of most birds, at least at a distance, must be silent, yet it appears audible, each species creating a different eye music, from the nonchalant melancholy of seagulls to the staccato of flitting tits. John Hull, who lost his sight completely in his late 40s, gradually experienced the loss of all visual imagery and memory and a descent into what he calls deep blindness. According to Sachs, writing about the senses in the New Yorker, being a whole-body seer, Hull's term for characterizing his state of deep blindness, involved shifting his attention, his center of gravity, to the other senses, and Sachs notes, Hull writes again and again about how these have assumed a new richness and power. Thus he speaks of how the sound of the rain, never before accorded much attention, can now delineate a whole landscape for him, for its sound on the garden path is different from its sound as it drums on the lawn, or on the bushes in his garden, or on the fence dividing it from the road. Rain has a way of bringing out the contours of everything. It throws a colored blanket over previously invisible things. Instead of an intermittent and thus fragmented world, the steady falling rain creates continuity of acoustic experience, presents the fullness of an entire situation all at once, gives a sense of perspective and of the actual relationships of one part of the world with another. Sachs's phrase, never before accorded much attention, is telling here. Necessity fosters and furthers such an according of attention in those who are missing one or more of the senses. But we do not have to experience the loss of our sight or hearing or any other sensorium to accord attention to it. It is the invitation of mindfulness to meet our sense impressions at the point of contact and to know and linger in the knowing of these worlds in their fullness rather than in their diminution through our ignoring or habitually dulling of both the sense gates themselves and the mind that encounters them and accords them and ourselves meaning. Just as we can learn and be astonished by the capabilities of those who have suffered the loss of one or more sense and made extraordinary accommodations and adjustments in both body and mind to fashion a full life, so we can learn from purposefully according some attention to the natural world, which beckons to us and offers itself to us through all our senses simultaneously, a world in which our very senses were fashioned and honed, and in which we have been seamlessly embedded from the beginning. Although we tend not to notice it, we perceive across all our senses simultaneously in any and every moment. Even in Wright's description and Hull's, there are cross-references to the lost sense. Wright has to remind himself that he's not hearing what he is seeing, for it appears audible to him, manifests as eye music. And Hull, who has no visual experience, nevertheless speaks of a colored blanket thrown over previously invisible things, suggesting that they are indeed made visible through his careful hearing. The senses overlap and blend together and cross-pollinate. This experience is called synesthesia. We're not fragmented at the level of our being. We never were. Our senses, blending together, shape our knowing of the world and our participation in it from moment to moment. That we do not recognize this is merely a measure of our alienation from our own feeling body and from the natural world. David Abram, whose book The Spell of the Sensuous looks deeply into the cross-currents of phenomenology and the natural world as it is sensed and known by all the creatures that inhabit it, including ourselves when we dwell in the wild, shares with us the rich dimensionality of the sensory matrix that gave birth to us and nurtured us for hundreds of thousands of years. The raven's loud guttural cry as it swerves overhead is not circumscribed within a strictly audible field. It echoes through the visible, immediately animating the visible landscape with the reckless style or mood proper to that jet-black shape. My various senses, diverging as they do from a single coherent body, coherently converge as well in the perceived thing, just as the separate perspectives of my two eyes converge upon the raven and convene there into a single focus. My senses connect up with each other in the things I perceive, or rather each perceived thing gathers my senses together in a coherent way, and it is this that enables me to experience the thing itself as a center of forces, as another nexus of experience, as an other. Hence, just as we have described perception as a dynamic participation between my body and things, so we now discern within the act of perception a participation between the various sensory systems of the body itself. Indeed, these events are not separable, for the intertwining of my body with the things it perceives is effected only through the interweaving of my senses, and vice versa. The relative divergence of my bodily senses, eyes in the front of the head, ears toward the back, etc., and their curious bifurcation, not one but two eyes, one on each side, and similarly 2 ears, 2 nostrils, etc., indicates that this body is a form destined to the world. It ensures that my body is a sort of open circuit that completes itself only in things, in others, in the encompassing earth. Immersed and embedded in the natural world, we only know it through our senses, and we are known through the senses of other beings, including beings that are not human, but who sense us all the same in their own ways, whether it be a mosquito looking for lunch, or birds announcing our arrival in a forest glen. We are part of this landscape, grew up in it, and are still the possessors of all its gifts, although compared to our hunter and gatherer ancestors, ours may have atrophied somewhat from lack of use. But the spell of the sensuous in Abram's enticing and entrancing phrase is no further than the sound of the rain taken in, or the feel of the air on the skin, or the warmth of the sun on our backs, or the look in your dog's eye when you come near. Can we feel it? Can we know it? Can we be embraced by it? And when might that be? When? Seeing. We do a lot of looking. We look through lenses, telescopes, television tubes. Our looking is perfected every day, but we see less and less. Never has it been more urgent to speak of seeing. We are onlookers, spectators, subjects we are that look at objects. Quickly we stick labels on all that is, labels that stick once and for all. By these labels we recognize everything, but no longer see anything. Frederick Frank, The Zen of Seeing. There's a field near my house that, seen from a certain angle, particularly delights my eye. I pass from the bottom of this field several times a day and in all seasons as I walk with our dog. Sometimes I'm alone, sometimes with other people, sometimes even without the dog. It doesn't matter. The field is continually offering a curriculum of light and shadow, form and color to the passerby, evoking the challenge to sense and drink in any and every way whatever is delivered to eyes, ears, nose, palate, and skin. Every day, every hour, every minute, with every passing cloud, in every weather, with every season, what is here to be seen is different, perpetually changing, morphing with the light and the heat and the season from one aspect to another, like the landscapes of mountains and gorges and the fields of haystacks that enticed Monet to paint from the same spot on multiple easels as the day unfolded, as the seasons turned, capturing the uncapturable light and its mysterious birthing of shape and texture, color and shadow and form. The challenge for us is to see that such a display offered up by the world that we inhabit is in fact everywhere. Yet this particular field, resting as it does on the slope of a gentle and uneven hill, with two outcroppings of fieldstone adding to its unevenness, has a special catalytic effect on me, especially when seen from below. Gazing upon it, I am somehow changed, recalibrated, more finely tuned to both inner and outer landscapes. It lies nestled on the hill, sloping up to the east between two other flat fields above and below that are conservation land and so grow wild, mostly with grass. To the north is the back of a faded red barn, and beyond that, a cobblestone driveway and an old but well-kept New England farmhouse, white, segmented, obviously elongated over the years, stretching section by skillfully added section towards the oldest, nearest the road. Another conservation field on the same slope lies to the south, separated from the fenced-in one by a double row of tall oaks and chokecherries on either side and overarching a low rock wall, no doubt dating to colonial times when the land was first cleared for planting and all the ancient dug-up black granite stones piled wide and massively along the edges. The field that so captures my eye has a 3-tier wooden fence around it with two hardly visible electric wires set off from each fence post by very visible yellow spacers set there to contain the 2 young cows our farmer neighbor keeps there part of each year, his babies. The fence describes a markedly irregular pentagon that for a long time I perceived as a rectangle. Then it took on the look of a trapezoid. Only with extended gazing did it finally reveal itself as actually 5-sided. The western lowermost side of the fence parallels the eastern one above it, and these two are connected to the south as if they were the long-facing sides of a rectangle. The shorter connecting side mounting straight up the hill, paralleling the double line of trees and the rock wall just to its south. 20 feet or so to the north, past the small cowshed built into the bottom western side, the fence cuts diagonally northeast up the hill for a ways. Then there is a gate where this sloping side meets the shortest 5th side that joins up with the top edge in a right angle. This configuration gives both field and fence an unstudied and unruly look that hugs the contours of the field and fits perfectly within the sweep of this landscape. From the bottom right, southwest, my favorite vantage point, the whole of the field is visible except for the interior of the cowshed and what the shed obscures in my line of sight. I love this particular field. For some mysterious reason, walking below it and unavoidably gazing upon it enlivens my seeing. All is suddenly more vivid in the world. I sit here in this moment in the shade, gazing up on the hill from the southwest vantage. The sun hangs fairly high in the mid-morning sky on this July 4th, soaking the field in intense light and heat. A narrow, continually expanding line of shade advances right to left from the southern edge, courtesy of the row of trees. The field is overgrown, the grass tall, dried to browns and golds, gone completely to seed. Droplets of white hang above it, dabbed there by an abundance of wild daisies the cows haven't got to cropping yet. White butterflies flutter here and there, and an occasional dragonfly, the large kind, patrolling low and fast over the grass through the languid air like the marvelous, improbable, carboniferous creature that it is, with its 2 pairs of delicately laced, transparent, extremely versatile wings, on the wing in search of mosquitoes. 2 scrub trees stand in the field by themselves in the southwest corner right in front of me, and a few bigger ones shade the shed from either side. Already there is a hot, hazy feel to the day. The sky behind me is blue, mostly cloudless, yet in my field of vision, the sky above the field, fringed by the large, more distant trees beyond the upper field, is entirely white. Walking back along the path below the field in the farmhouse after sitting in the grass gazing at the field for some time, the expanses of red fescue to my left are somehow redder than when I came. Now I am seeing large splotches of purple here and there in the grass, what may be flowering wild peas, which I had barely noticed before. The yellow lilies abundantly populating cutout circles at the edges of the large lawn are more yellow, their micromotion, almost a bouncing in the light breeze, more apparent to my eye. I see far more dragonflies nearby than I had earlier, and notice how the swallows, which before I barely saw at all, are flitting and swooping in low over the tall grass, back and forth across the lawn to the ample dapples and streaks of oranges and pinks, reds, blues, purples, and golds. The farmer loves his flowers, all defined by an overflowing magnificence of brilliant yellow sedum with its succulent greenery spilling along the expansive horizontal lines of a two-tiered rock-walled garden that rises from the far edge of the huge lawn below the house. When I come to the road, I turn right, uphill, for veritably it is all the same hill, towards my house, knowing that later this afternoon the field and the walk I will take along the same trajectory will be entirely different, and that the difference will make me different, will require me to be different, meaning present afresh for what will be offered up to the senses in whatever moment I arrive. And it is always so. Summer or winter, spring or fall, yesterday or today, in rain and gloom and snow, at night, under the stars, I am always arriving. It is already here, just as it is, always the same field, but never the same. In walking these paths, there is less and less separation between me and the view when I give myself over to attending, when I allow myself to come to and live within my senses. Subject, seer, and object, what is seen, unite in the moment of seeing. Otherwise, it's not seeing. One moment I'm separate from a conventional scene as described to myself in my head. The next moment, there is no scene, no description, only being here, only seeing, only drinking in through the eyes and other senses so pure they already know how to drink in whatever is presented, without any direction at all, without any narrative at all, without any thought. In such moments, there is only walking, only standing, only sitting, or for that matter, only lying in the field, only feeling the air. Of all the senses, it is vision, the domain of the eyes, that dominates in language and metaphor. We speak of our view of the world and of ourselves, of gaining insight and perspective. We exhort each other to look and then to see, which is as different from looking as hearing is from listening or smelling is from sniffing. Seeing is apprehending, taking hold, drinking in, cognizing relationships including their emotional texture, perceiving what is actually here. Carl Jung observed that we should not pretend to understand the world only by the intellect. We apprehend it just as much through feeling. Marcel Proust put it this way: the true journey of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having fresh eyes. We see what we want to see, not what is actually before our eyes. We look, but we may not apprehend or comprehend. We all have our blind spots and our blindnesses, yet we can, if motivated, tune our seeing just as we can tune an instrument, thereby increasing its sensitivity, its range, its clarity, its empathy. The goal would be to see things more as they actually are, rather than how we would like them to be or fear them to be, or only registering what we are socially conditioned to see or feel. If Jung was correct, we apprehend with our feelings, yes, but then we had best be intimate with them and know them for what they are, or they will provide only distorted lenses for any real seeing or real knowing. One way or another, as it does with the other senses, our own mind often obscures our capacity to see clearly. For this reason, if we wish to experience life fully, and to take hold of it fully, we will need to train ourselves to see through or behind the appearances of things. We will need to cultivate intimacy with the stream of our own thinking, which colors everything in the sensory domain. If we are able to perceive the interior and exterior landscapes, including events and occurrences to the degree that they can be known, in their actuality as they truly are. Starting here, what do you want to remember? How sunlight creeps along a shining floor? What scent of old wood hovers? What softened sound from outside fills the air? Will you ever bring a better gift for the world than the breathing respect that you carry wherever you go right now? Are you waiting for time to show you some better thoughts? When you turn around, starting here, lift this new glimpse that you found. Carry into evening all that you want from this day. This interval you spent reading or hearing this, keep it for life. What can anyone give you greater than now, starting here, right in this room, when you turn around? William Stafford, you reading this, be ready. Being seen. My wife Mila and I sometimes do an exercise with people who come to our mindful parenting workshops that involves remembering back to a moment in your childhood when you felt completely seen and accepted for who you were by an adult, not necessarily a parent, and dwelling in the feeling, tone, and images conjured up by the memory. Alternatively, if no such memories of being seen in childhood arise when invited, you are invited to notice, if they arise instead, moments in which you felt unseen, disregarded, not at all accepted for who you were by an adult in your life. It's amazing how quickly and how vividly moments of being seen and fully accepted arise for us in memory when invited in the safety of such a gathering. Stories emerge of quiet moments digging in the dirt as a child with one's grandmother, or of a parent simply holding one's hand while gazing into a river, or of someone dropping an egg on the floor on purpose after you've done so by accident just so you wouldn't feel alone or ashamed. These memories arise spontaneously, often without having ever been consciously recalled before. They have been here with us our whole life, never forgotten, for we are not likely to forget, even as children, moments of feeling completely seen and accepted. Most of the time, such moments are without words. They often unfold in silence in a parallel play of doing together and being together wordlessly. Perhaps there is merely the exchange of a glance or a gaze, a smile or a sense of being held or hugged, or your hand taken and held. But you know in that moment that you are seen and known and felt, and nothing in the world feels better, puts you more at ease and sets the world aright, puts you more at peace. Even if there is only one such memory in us, we carry it forever. We never forget it. It is in there. It is in here, because it meant so much, revealed so much, honored so much. It was more of a gift than we could consciously know, but intuitively we knew. The body knew, the heart knew, and we knew non-conceptually. And in the knowing, we were moved and are moved to this day by the memory. It's also amazing how few such memories any of us have, and how many of us have no such memories. Instead, there may be recollections of moments in which we felt distinctly unseen, unaccepted, even shamed and ridiculed for being as we were. The message from such an exercise for parents is, of course, that every moment with our children is an opportunity for us to see our children as they are and to accept them fully at any and every age. If such moments of being seen were so important for us as children that we have never forgotten them, even if they were extremely rare or singular, then why not be mindful of the healing power of such quiet presence as can come from seeing your children, at least in some moments, beyond your expectations for them, beyond your fears and your judgments, and even your hopes. These moments can be fleeting, but if inhabited and embraced, they are deep nourishment, an oxygen line of loving kindness straight into the heart of the other. So our regard, from the French regarder, to look, is itself a worthy object of attention, to be held in awareness and the consequences of it seen, felt, and known. For it is not just seeing that is important, there is also its reciprocal being seen. And if that is true for each of us, it is true for all of us. for any and every other. Seeing and being seen complete a mysterious circuit of reciprocity, a reciprocity of presence that Thich Nhat Hanh calls interbeing. That presence holds us and reassures us and lets us know that our inclination to be who we actually are and to show ourselves in our fullness is a healthy impulse, because who we actually are has been seen, recognized, and accepted, our core sovereignty of being acknowledged, embraced. All this is part of the reciprocity of seeing when seeing is true seeing. When the veils of our ideas and opinions thin enough so we can see and know things as they are, rather than staying stuck in how we desire them to be or not to be, our vision becomes benign, tranquil, peaceful, healing. And it is felt by others as such instantly. It is felt, it is known, and it feels very, very good. It's not just children and other people who know when they are being looked at and can feel instantly the quality and intent of a gaze. Animals know it too and sense how it is that we are seeing them, with what qualities of mind and heart, whether in fear or in gladness. And women, of course, know and have always known the ominous, depersonalizing, objectifying, sometimes predatory aggression of a certain male gaze, unsoftened by caring and by an honoring of the sovereignty of the other. Some ancient native traditions believe that the world feels our seeing and sees us right back, even the trees and the bushes, even the rocks. And certainly if you have ever spent a night alone in the rainforest or in the woods, you will know that the quality of your seeing and of your being is felt and known by Abram's more-than-human world. You will sense that you are definitely being seen and known for what you really are, if not exactly how you normally think of yourself, and that whether you are comfortable with it or not, you are an intimate part of this one animate and sensuous world. Only the garden was always marvelous. No one had cared for it for a very long time, and it had gone back to seed and wildflowers. Its beauty was in a subtlety only careful watching could perceive. Gioia Timpanelli, sometimes the soul. There they were, dignified, invisible, moving without pressure over the dead leaves, in the autumn heat, through the vibrant air, and the bird called in response to the unheard music hidden in the shrubbery, and the unseen eye-beam crossed, for the roses had the look of flowers that are looked at. T.S. Eliot, Burnt Norton, 4 quartets. Hearing. Old pond. Frog jumps in. Splash. Basho, 1644 to 1694. Heavy early morning mid-November rain is hitting the roof in the darkness above my head. Every moment there is the sound of it. Can I hear it, beyond my thoughts about the rain, even for one moment? Can I receive these sounds as they are, with no concepts whatsoever, including the concept of sound? I notice that hearing happens effortlessly. I don't have to do anything. There's nothing to do. In fact, in order to really hear, I have to get out of the way. My I is extra. There is no need for a me that is hearing or looking out for the sounds that is listening. In fact, I notice that is precisely where all the thinking is spouting from expectations, from ideas about my experience. I experiment. Can I simply let sound come and meet the ear consciousness that arises in the bare experience of hearing, as is already happening in any and every moment? Is it actually possible to get out of my own way and just let there be hearing? To let the sounds come to the ear, to be in the ear, in the air, in a moment, without any embellishment, without any trying, just hearing what is here to be heard, since the sounds are already rapping at the gateway of the ears. Being with hearing in the stillness of open attending. Drip, drip, drip. Gurgle, gurgle, gurgle. Swirl, swirl, swirl. The air filled with sound. The body bathed in sound. In utter stillness, there is only the rain on the roof, whipped sometimes by the wind into sheets spattering on the windows, pure sound in the ears, filling the room. In this moment, somewhere far in the background, there is the knowing that I am sitting here, that rain is falling. But the experience before thinking, behind any thoughts that do secrete themselves, is one of pure sound, just hearing. No longer a separate hearer and what is being heard. There is only hearing, hearing, hearing. And in the hearing, the knowing of sound beyond words like rain, beyond concepts like me and hearing. The knowing rests in the hearing. For now, they are one. This rain is so forceful this morning, so compelling, so absorbing, that attention sustains itself effortlessly. The experiencing of sound has in this moment trumped the conceptual mind. This is not always or even usually the case. It is so easy to be carried into thinking. It is so easy to distract myself, to be carried so far away from the ears that I do not even hear the rain anymore, no matter how forceful, even though the body and the ears are still just as bathed in its sounds as the moment before, when there was only just this. So an elemental challenge of mindfulness is to rest in the awareness of hearing, hearing only what is here, moment by moment, sounds arising, passing, silence inside and underneath sounds, beyond interpreting the momentary experience as either pleasant or unpleasant or neutral, beyond all identifiers and judgments, beyond all thoughts about anything. Just this giving myself over to sitting, hearing, breathing, knowing. In the hearing, there is momentary freedom from any me hearing and from what is heard, from both a knower and what is known. Nothing is missing. A moment of original mind, empty, knowing, vast. For a brief moment, perhaps, we have actually arrived at our senses. Can we abide here for a time? Can we live here? What would we lose? What might be gained, recovered? When are sounds and the spaces between sounds not present for us? When are sights not present to us? Are we here for them? Can we be here with them? Can we be the knowing, rest in the knowing, act out of the knowing, fully present with what already is? What is the feeling tone of such a moment? Trying is not the answer. We do not have to try to hear. But the mind is devious. Can we know it? Can we know it? Even in Kyoto, hearing the cuckoo's cry, I long for Kyoto. Basho. Be a person here. Stand by the river. Invoke the owls. Invoke winter, then spring. Let any season that wants to come here to make its own call. After that sound goes away, wait. A slow bubble rises through the earth and begins to include sky, stars, all space, even the outracing, expanding thought. Come back and hear the little sound again. Suddenly this dream you are having matches everyone's dream, and the result is the world. If a different call came, there wouldn't be any world, or you, or the river, or the owls calling. How you stand here is important. How you listen for the next thing to happen. How you breathe. William Stafford, Being a Person.